It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Welcome back to Tiny House Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Lisa Tranter, an experienced tiny house dweller who lives with her partner Matt in their strikingly beautiful DIY tiny home in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. Lisa dreamt of owning and living in a tiny house for a few years before meeting Matt, who quickly came on board after seeing how creative you can be designing a small space. And Matt just happened to be a bathroom and kitchen renovation specialist. What a great person to meet if you're dreaming of living in a tiny home, right? So Lisa and Matt are tiny living and builder enthusiasts. They built their first tiny home in 2018 and currently have plans to develop concept shipping container homes to allow more people to experience small space living and to expand the public awareness of tiny homes. And in this episode, we talked about the types of materials Lisa and Matt used in their tiny build and where they source their materials from, what they do for heating, cooling, and storage in their tiny home. We also talked about some non-negotiable features that were important for them to include in their home, what living in a tiny house has done for their relationship, the challenges of living in a small space, and much more. Now let's go hang out with Lisa. Welcome back to Tiny House Conversations. And Lisa, thanks so much for being here.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Absolutely. Pleasure to have you. You currently live in a beautiful tiny home with your partner, Matt, in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales. And I'd love if we're able to start by having you, take us back to where your tiny house story really started and what inspired you both to want to build a tiny house together?
Yeah, so it all kind of started with me. I was living at home with my parents. I didn't really want to live with them forever, but the housing market was just a bit too much for one single person to kind of cope with. So I found tiny houses and started looking them up and sort of following the movement a bit, following YouTube videos and some of the stuff that they put on in America. I think there's a couple of shows over there that they put up. And I just started following that on Instagram, Facebook, things like that. And then when I met Matt, our first date was virtually me nonstop talking about tiny houses and how I wanted to build one or at least buy one. 6 months after we started dating, he's just like, let's build a tiny house. I'm like, okay, cool. Where do we start? And he goes, well, there's this cool block of land. I'm like, cool. We looked at that and we purchased it. And then, yeah, it all came together from there. Bought the trailer, started looking at materials and what we sort of wanted it to look like and how it wanted to be visually. And then we sort of got into the nitty-gritty of how it's going to be laid out, what's important to either of us, and we started designing from there.
Wow, I love that. And I feel like it's a common story where, a lot of people seem to turn to this idea of living in a tiny house or building a tiny house as an alternative way of, something that's way more cost effective than, the traditional route of getting a mortgage and a regular home and all those types of things. And so, yeah, it's really nice to know that this way is available for a lot of people. And, even better, meeting someone like Matt, as you say, because I know that he's got a business in bathroom and kitchen renovation. So that's pretty handy to kind of, want to have this dream of a tiny home and then you meet someone that kind of has these really transferable skills. And I'm wondering because you did your house as a DIY build, I'm wondering what that process was like for you both and how long did the build take?
Yeah, so definitely handy having Matt with the skills he does, as I have zero building skills. I guess the DIY side of things is he had sort of an idea in mind, or structural engineering idea in his mind about how it was all going to come together. We sat and debated on whether we do a steel frame or a wooden frame, eventually sort of agreeing on the wooden frame, purely because that's what he's worked with in the past. It's easy to get, and should we do need to change anything in the framing section of the build, we were able to really easily with the wooden frame, whereas with steel or metal framing, if we wanted to change something that was harder to do. Then we sort of went through a design for the interior, sort of focusing on the things that were important to the two of us and sort of agreeing on what materials we wanted to use. Once that design was complete, we wanted wood, Matt wanted marble, we wanted a real bathroom with tiles. We wanted to avoid anything that was going to have a lot of wear and tear, because the intent was for this house to last a long time.
And I think also you mentioned with going with the wooden frame versus the steel. So I guess the other thing would be is that it's lighter. So having to kind of come under or within the weight restrictions of the tiny house and all of that. That's another, I think, positive aspect of that too, because it seems to be, at least from the research that I've done and speaking to different people and what's out there online, it seems to be more common that people are doing using the wooden frames, I think. And in terms of the materials you were talking about, did you source all new materials? Were there any salvage materials that you used?
Yeah, we tried to salvage as much as we could. Because everything had to be custom made to fit into the house, it was tricky to find stuff though. So kitchen cabinets, those sorts of things you couldn't do. Like the stairs needed to be custom built. The most of the bathroom needed to be custom built. We did manage to, our entire floor minus the tiles was recycled timber from an old factory in Redfern. There was a guy down in Picton, Camden area, who basically just pulled up old floors out of factory units and houses and pretty much anything old. And so you went into his yard and there was just wood, all kinds of wood. There was big sleepers, which would have been awesome, giant railway sleepers. He had wood from flooring, all different types, hardwood, pine, whatever. And yeah, we managed to salvage, I think there was 15 square meters of that or more. It was huge. There was a huge amount. So we managed to use all of that in the house, and then our shelving, which is on the walls, the treads for the stairs, that's all the same wood. There was a lot of it.
Yeah, that's amazing. What size is your home?
So we have roughly 22 square meters on the ground floor, and then we have 16 square meters in loft space, give or take. So it's quite large in terms of square footage. Our length is 9 meters, and that's because the front of the house is over the drawbar. We sort of built with the intention of not moving the house at all, or if we did, it would only move a short distance, and we would still need professionals to come and help us. Tiny houses aren't great travelers, so even if they're sort of built for that, they're not really meant to go too far. So we were a little bit more generous with our size, purely because we purchased the land that we wanted to put it on, and we were not really intending on moving it too far, if at all.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's because it seems to be on the larger end of some of the other tiny houses. But I mean, it makes sense if you're going to stay there for a long period of time and having that little bit of extra space. And I know that your loft height is quite functional too, because it allows you to be able to actually stand up on your loft, which I think not every tiny home does that. And I think that's a really good feature and a good thing to think about it long term too, especially people are a little bit older, or as you're aging, or even just for long-term health.
Definitely. Yeah. Matt and I both have, they're not major health issues, but we get sore.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, stooping down and crawling into bed every day just wasn't really appealing to us. And because we were in the position where we are, where we purchased our land and stuff, we were able to be not only generous with the length of our house, but a little bit more generous with the height of our house as well.
Yeah.
So,
No, that's great. And are you guys on or off the grid?
we are currently on the grid. There's a few little design flaws that prevented us going off grid, and that's the 5 skylights currently on the roof and the smaller footprint. So we had intended on doing solar and rainwater catchment as well for at least grey water toilets and like the laundry and things like that. Solar panels wouldn't obviously fit on the roof either, so we haven't been able to go with solar yet either. But we have recently put a awning over our shipping container, which has some storage in it, and we have put a proper roof over the veranda. So it's more like a patio now. So we are looking at getting some nice big rainwater tanks and putting solar panels on there. Matt collects classic cars, and he did intend on actually having a garage for them at some stage. So I think when he decided that he wanted 5 skylights in the roof and to go off grid, the intention was to put solar panels elsewhere. So
yeah.
he also liked the idea of those solar panels that opened like a flower, and he thought, we can get a couple of those. And then after research, we realized they were ridiculously expensive.
Yeah. I mean, and there is different options for solar, as you say. I know there's also options of having like trailers. Some tiny house building companies have actual whole trailers where you can have quite a lot of solar panels that are external from the home. And I think also it would be really beautiful to have those skylights. I know just having one skylight is beautiful. So I'm wondering, what do you guys do in the winter for heating and then cooling in the summer?
Yeah, so for heating, we have a small combustion fireplace. It's fabulously designed. It's deep enough and tall enough that you can fit full-size logs in, but you can only maybe put 1.5, 2 in at a time. We're really fortunate that we have a lot of hardwood around us, so they last a long time, which is great. And that heats up the house so quickly. 10 minutes of that going full blast, and the house is almost too hot. For summer, we have an air conditioner, which, because we went with a black exterior, does work. It's bum off. It works hard. However, we did invest in a lot of insulation. So when we did decide on going with the black colour bond, we did put extra insulation through the house, and we put blinds on all of the windows as well. And we went with a honeycomb blind. So you've got the 2 air pockets, one on the inside and one on the outside. And so when the heat hits the window, it kind of gets trapped in those blinds and keeps the house really cool. We've noticed a huge difference since installing those, how quickly, firstly, the house cools down in summer. The house doesn't get nearly as heat soaked with them on. And then we put them on the skylights as well. So it's made a huge difference keeping both the heat in winter, not that it gets very hot, very cold here, and in summer, keeping the cool air in.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you think, I guess, especially in a small space, that things could heat up quite quickly if you've got that direct sun and all of that too. And also because you're in the mountains. Would love to know, what were some of the non-negotiable features that you wanted to include in your home? And do you have a favorite feature of your home?
Yeah, so non-negotiables was a full working kitchen for me, coming from a 1-bedroom flat that didn't have a kitchen at all. So that was a non-negotiable for me. I wanted oven, stove, the whole thing. And then for Matt, a non-negotiable was a nice bathroom and standing height in the bedroom.
I agree with all of that, and I feel like that's going to be very similar for me too. I think it's important to, from what I've heard, because my tiny house isn't going to be built until later this year, but from what I've heard a lot of people say, and just from asking different people, it's like, think about those things that are really important to you, and what do you value the most, and where are you going to spend most of your time if you're in the home, and all of those kinds of things, and see if you can and build your design around that. So that's cool that you're able to kind of compromise and put in, what was really important for both of you. So yeah, that's great. And yeah, do you have a favorite feature or aspect of your home, or something that you really love?
I really love all of the windows. I think in a small space, not only do you have to sort of think about what's important in terms of design and what you're actually going to use versus what you think you might use, but being in a small space like this, you need to take into account how it's going to make you feel if you are stuck inside, say, for 3 days in rain. So having as many windows as we have, I think makes a huge difference, because on a wet, horrible day, you can open up all the blinds and you still get a lot of light. And then on a really nice day, I'll open up all the doors and all the windows, and it feels less like a tiny house and more just a house with a big outdoor space. They suck in summer when it gets really hot, because the house tends to heat up very quickly, hence the honeycomb blinds. But on a really beautiful day when it's not super hot, it's awesome. It's probably my favorite feature.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it would be a matter of also, it's like it brings the outside in too. So because you're in such a nice space where you're parked, and then you can see the trees and the sky and all of that, and then to be able to have that through the windows, and then also being in a small space kind of forces you to be outside a bit more anyway. And what are you guys doing for storage in your home?
Yeah, so we have a fair bit of storage actually inside the house. Under the bed, there's a load of storage. We both have individual wardrobes. The stairs are storage, but there's only so much that you can kind of store in there. You kind of only store everyday regular household items. We have our laundry, which is exterior to the house, which that's got a lot of our recycling and our bins and our laundry goods. But we also have a shipping container as well, which is storage basically for all the stuff that doesn't fit in a tiny house, but you still need. So I've got horses. So my horse gear is in there. We both enjoy snow sports. So snowboards, skis, all that sort of stuff is in there. Gardening equipment, mowers, whippersnippers, all that sort of stuff is stored in that container, because it's just not going to fit in the house. And we don't really want it in the house as well. Like, you don't want it to be too cluttered with all your other bits and bobs.
Yeah, for sure. Someone that I spoke to recently kind of made the joke of tiny house, big shed for all the other things that you store, like even tools and all the stuff that you're talking about too. I think it's really cool actually to be able to, especially if you've got the space, is like you have your tiny home and then you can build other things around it that can be functional for storage, and even like an entertainment area, like on a deck, and those types of things too. So, yeah.
Everyone has their hobbies, and if you want to go really tiny, you still have to take them into consideration. So you either have storage elsewhere, or you try and fit them into your tiny. And you're either going to love that, or you're absolutely going to hate it because it ends up too cluttered.
Yeah, definitely. And just going back to your build, so I'm wondering, what was one of the biggest struggles during the building process?
Yeah, so the biggest struggle Matt and his guys had was bracing the house. One of the things that we kind of regret doing is having the big double doors at one end of the house. They are, I think they're 8 foot. And because when you're framing and you're trying to brace the house before you put any cladding on the outside or gyprock on the inside, because there's a huge section of the house that wasn't actually being braced at all because there was a door that was intending on being there. There was a lot of movement, and they were a little bit worried about how it would withstand any kind of severe force, wind being the main one where we are. We tend to get hit with some pretty heavy winds if it's coming from the west. So they had a lot of difficulty bracing because of that door. But once they got the cladding on the outside, it ended up holding it all together really, really well. So we don't really have any movement at all, even in strong winds now. But it was a concern at the time, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's great to hear. That it's all worked out. And I'm wondering as well, what was the overall cost of your home?
So we never actually, like, all the bills got paid, obviously, but we never actually sort of sat down and worked it all out. But thankfully, we got a lot of stuff through Matt's business. He was able to use a lot of stuff that wasn't necessarily, that was left over from other jobs that he's done. So that sort of kept our budget down a little bit. And because we did a lot of the labor ourselves, whether Matt was here on his own doing the work or we had friends or family coming to help, we kept the cost down a little bit as well. But we estimate we spent 90,000 or around that.
So you built something really, really beautiful and modern. And
yeah, I think we're probably on the more expensive end of the market, particularly for a DIY, because you can buy virtually a tiny house off the shelf for less than what we did to build it, with a lot of the fittings and fixtures already done and dusted and in and secure and things like that. So I think we're on the more expensive side, but for the quality that we put into it, like our kitchen was custom built by a kitchen cabinet guy. We've got a marble, well, fake marble, but marble bench top. We've got our bathrooms fully tiled. We've got fireplaces and everything's sort of built in. So the quality's right up there. Basically, you're living in a normal house, and for quality, it's just smaller.
Yeah, definitely. I think there is a range of different prices of DIYs, isn't there? Because I have seen some people, depending on how much they did themselves, what kind of materials they're using, if they, outsourced any of it to other people. I've seen, as low as anywhere from 10,000 to 50, 60, 70. So yeah, I guess there's a spectrum. And as you say, because you've used such high quality materials, and it is very similar to a regular home, but just a tiny version. I think that's still great. And then also, if you think about, how much a regular home costs to buy, especially in Sydney or in New South Wales or, different parts of the country, especially in the main cities and all of that, it's such a fraction of that price. Because I know for me as well, I'm not going to be doing a DIY build, at least not for my first home, and then we'll see what happens with other parts of the home, because I would like to have a hand in what I'm going to be living in and what I'm creating. But it seems to be that a lot of the building companies, especially in the last couple of years with everything that's been going on, the price has gone up quite a lot. So it could be over 100,000 for some homes, depending on obviously the features and the size and the materials and all of that. So I think, what you guys did with that amount is really great. So you guys have been in your home for about 3 years now, and I'm wondering if, is there anything particularly challenging about living in a tiny home for you, and what are some of the challenges you might have experienced?
Since I've been working from home since March 2020, basically, we have noticed that there's nowhere really private for us to do separate things. And that's been kind of challenging. Particularly Matt's really busy with his own business right now, and he's getting home. He either stays at the office and comes home late, and I've finished working, and he stays at the office, finishes work there, and then comes home, and then we're together, and that's fine. But on the days that he does come home early and then intends on working at home as well as me, our phone calls tend to cross over, which has been interesting and annoying. So I think having a separate room that we could either both escape to make our phone calls or finish our work day would have been a lot nicer. But I think that's probably I think the heat as well. It's just getting hotter and hotter where we live now, and the heat's been a real challenge as well because we can't necessarily go outside on a hot day. Like both of us, we're kind of stuck inside in the air conditioning. So, yeah, those two things are probably the most challenging things we've come across yet.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. And do you feel like in terms of, you're talking about like the separation of spaces for a bit more privacy, or, so you guys can like do what you need to do or have phone calls, do you feel like that would be something that you do differently if you could do it again? Or is there something else that you might do differently with your build or any of the final features of your home?
I think we would change things slightly. I think we might enclose the bedroom, firstly because of mosquitoes. That's a war we've waged for the last 6 months, but also for that privacy as well. So we probably allocate a private space where you can go, like the bedroom, and if you want to go to bed early, or if you need to work and you need to make an important phone call and you can't be disrupted, we would go into there. At the moment, the only room that is fully enclosed is our bathroom, and you don't want to make a phone call in the bathroom if you can help it. So it's either outside or in the bathroom.
Yeah, I suppose it seems to be that with tiny homes, there is more open space living. And
Yes.
Unless you actually intentionally build a separate room or a separate space, maybe you don't find out until later, like what you're talking about with how that actually plays out day to day. So that's a really good thing to know and maybe consider for people that are at the beginning of, maybe planning their build or what they're going to do. Yeah.
Definitely if you're planning on working from home. I guess when we built the house, I wasn't working in a job that allowed me to do that. I was managing cafes in Sydney. So when I started this role and I was told to work from home until further notice, having privacy to make a phone call when someone else was in the house was kind of the last thing on our minds when we built.
Hindsight's always 2020.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think it's also a matter of learning by doing as well, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think we helped a friend build a container house, and they are able to lock their bedroom door. And looking at what we've done versus what they've done, and being able to do that next time, it's definitely going to be on the list of must-haves for sure.
Nice. So I'm curious, what's one of the best parts about tiny house living for you?
I like the tiny house because it's a much more cozy feeling space. Like I don't feel, although we've got things and knickknacks in our house and more by the year that we live here, but I don't feel obligated to fill those spaces with anything. I feel like I have just what I need and I don't need anything else. I don't need spare rooms. I don't need things, material things. I like the fact that we're both saving money by not buying random things. I like that cleaning only takes me half an hour to 45 minutes on a bad day and not 2 hours or every second or third day to clean the entire house. I like the warmth that a small house brings. I find that sometimes bigger houses, even though they may be nicely designed or nicely sort of spaced, there's some houses are just cold. Oh, and I like to spend more time outside. So I guess having a small house means that you can't really be inside to do something. So you're obligated to spend more time outside.
Great. And I really loved what you said about not needing to fill extra space and not needing to buy extra things and I guess living within your means essentially is what you're saying. So only really having what you need. And I resonate with that a lot because I feel like even before being interested in tiny homes for years, I've always been this kind of minimalist and living by those types of principles of having I mean, we all have things that we enjoy and, you know, our comforts and those types of things. There's definitely nothing wrong with any of that. But for myself, I've thought for a really long time, you know, what's functional, what's practical, what's necessary, and maybe even what's meaningful and brings joy, you know, those types of things, and then not needing to or not wanting to build up and clutter the space and life with more material things. So I think that's seems to be, you know, very much in alignment with this whole tiny house lifestyle, this minimalist type approach. And I think it's also a good reminder of, I guess, like what makes us human and what's most important to us. At least for me, it's not material things. It's other things like what you're talking about with being able to spend time outside and in nature, and just having a really nice place that you can call home, where it doesn't need to be anything fancy. It can be a smaller space and you can still have everything that you need and still feel just as at home. Yeah, just having like a little place that you can call your home. And so you talked about some of your favorite parts or some of the best parts for you. What about anything that's your least favorite part about living tiny?
I think the hardest part about living in a tiny house is, even though it's an easy space to clean, it does get messy very quickly as well. And it can get very cluttered very quickly, even if it's your basic day-to-day chores. Like at the moment, I've got a washing basket of washing that needs to be folded and put away, and it's been there for probably only a couple of hours. But in that couple of hours, my tiny house has gone from a nice, comfortable, clean space to there's clutter. I find that really difficult and something I don't enjoy, like being able to having that there. But also having pets in a small space is also quite challenging as well. Like we did accidentally get quite a large dog, and he tends to take up a lot of space. And the cats, there's a lot of cat dander, which I'm allergic to. So, you know, having that small space, we do get very messy and very cluttered very, very quickly, given the chance.
I guess it's almost like there's nowhere to hide, is there?
No,
in
there's
a small space.
like, we've got a wardrobe and you can only shove so much stuff in there before it starts to come back out again. So, yeah, it's probably the hardest part, I think.
Yes, it's like a dance. Yeah, just getting used to having its place, and yeah, there's always things to adjust to, I suppose, depending on your situation. And you know, I'm wondering as well. There's two of you living there. What has living in a small space like your tiny home done for your relationship?
Yeah, I think for our relationship, it's allowed us to be physically close without the obligation to be at each other all the time as well. Like we are forced to sit beside each other in the house, but we can do two different things. Whereas I think if we were living in a normal house, we would be physically apart as well as being, I guess, mentally apart as well. And I think being in the small space, we're very comfortable being next to each other but doing two totally different things, whether one's watching television and I'm listening to a podcast or reading a book or something like that. I like that about the tiny and what it's done to our relationship. I feel like it can, and it does occasionally put a bit of strain on our relationship, particularly with also being in that small space. Having the washing sitting on the floor bugs one of us, say, more than the other person. And that can kind of create a little bit of tension if you already had a rough day at work or whatever and you come home and the chores aren't done, or there's something on the floor that could have been picked up and put away. It kind of puts a little bit more tension on the relationship there. So it definitely has its perks. But I guess you'd encounter that in even a normal house as well.
Yeah. And have you found that because you are living in a small space, that, you know, if there is anything that comes up, any tension or friction or anything like that, that it almost forces you to unpack it and deal with it there and then, or in a shorter time frame, because maybe there's not necessarily elsewhere for you to maybe take some time apart and separate and go through your own process and then come back together and talk about it. I mean, I guess you can go for a walk and stuff as well, but yeah, I'm just wondering what that aspect is like.
Yeah, definitely makes us tackle those things a lot sooner than I think we would normally if we were living in in a bigger house. Because yeah, like you said, you aren't able to escape. You're still in the same kitchen. You're still in the same lounge room. You're still in the same bedroom. Yeah, we are able to go for walks and go for a drive or spend time outside, and that sort of physically distances us enough that we can take that time to ourselves and sort of reflect on what the issue was. But at the end of the day, you still have to come inside and you still have to tackle it. And being in a small space, you literally don't have enough room in the house to hold all of that energy inside the house. If there is too much tension or if there's a negative energy in the house, it feels like it takes that on and it feels like it's sort of hovering above you and it can't go anywhere. So you do need to tackle that or talk about it or go through the motions of getting rid of that energy, because the small space holds it closer to you.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I'm also curious, is there anything that you wish you knew back when you started your tiny building journey that you might have more awareness about now?
I don't think there is, or at least not off the top of my head. I think we may have done things slightly differently in our build in hindsight, but I don't think there's anything I wish I'd known. I think before I'd met Matt, I'd done a lot of research and I'd looked at a lot of different concepts, before we even started the build. So I don't think there was anything that I wasn't naive to or hadn't thought about or hadn't contemplated before starting it.
That's great. When you're well researched and then you just go into things learning along the way and being okay with whatever happens and making mistakes and challenges coming up, but just keeping moving forward. And so as we wrap up the conversation today, are there any exciting projects that are coming up for you this year, or is there anything else that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, so Matt and his company, Hobbs Bathrooms, they have a really fancy new show home close to us, where it's going to have a bunch of concept bathrooms, kitchens, laundries, or pretty much anything basically building related. But also attached to that show home is going to be a concept shipping container house or flat, similar to the one that we helped some friends build, in terms of layout and how it's all put together. But that's going to be a fun little project which we hope to replicate at an investment property that we have, doing things slightly different in each one, and allowing people to come and visit those and stay in those. So that's something that he's working on. I'm just doing my own thing, not really doing much in terms of tiny house work at the moment. I have other stuff going on, but yeah, just sort of doing these sorts of interviews and trying to get tiny houses on the mainstream more so than they already are.
Yeah, definitely. And I have seen them popping up a little bit more in the mainstream, and hopefully that continues to happen so that more people know that of this option, because I think there's a lot of people struggling out there when it comes to homes and even just the finances of living. So I'll link to everything in the show notes, and I'll include the link to Matt's bathroom and renovation company. So you guys are building shipping containers to have on your land as like accommodation for people to be able to come and stay in?
Yeah, so the original concept plan, which is joined to the show home that Matt's building, will sort of be an example of what can be done, in terms of how well it can be done and the quality of materials and things like that. And you're not necessarily restricted with height, weight and length in the same way that you are with the tiny house. So for someone who's looking for something a little bit more permanent, that's a great concept. The ones that we'd love to put on our other block of land is for people to, try before they potentially buy. If you've got a partner or family who are potentially sitting on the fence and not sort of supporting you or not into it as much as say you are, it's an opportunity for you guys to go and stay in it for a couple of days to a week and actually see what it's really like living in a small space.
Yeah, sometimes it's not until you actually go and experience something. And I guess this is like anything in life, right? It's not until you go and experience it for yourself that you're like, oh, you have this a deeper insight into what something could be like. Because I know from the outside, it can be for a lot of people. I even saw this come up on a Facebook comment the other day on a tiny house page, and someone said, would anyone actually choose to live in a tiny house or a small space if it wasn't out of necessity? Obviously, there are people that do that, and then there can be that perception of, well, why would anyone want to go do that if they didn't have to? So I think it's cool to be able to give people a taste of that and see what it's like. And it's not going to be for everyone, but it's really nice to try before you buy, or even to just, I guess, get other people more in the know about all of this.
Yeah, I think also it's based on, obviously, everyone's seen our tiny house and the quality and the, I guess, luxury, if you want to put that in air quotes there, like luxury tiny houses, like these are going to be concept houses. So Matt really wants to push the boundaries with how far you can go in terms of luxury inside a really small space. And when you sort of think about design and livability, because I think a lot of tiny houses, particularly, I guess, those holiday ones you often see on Instagram and things like that, like they're amazing. They're absolutely incredible. But to live in them on a long-term basis, they may not be as, say, functional as something that's designed to be lived in like that.
Yeah, cool. And Lisa, where can people find and connect with you guys online?
We have, obviously, our Instagram. It's at tailored_tiny_co. We have a Facebook page, but they're not necessarily monitored all the time. So the best way to get in touch with us is to go to our website and shoot us an email. We have a contact us section there. If you are interested in anything that Matt's doing, you can just check out Hobbs. You'll be able to see any updates there. He's got Instagram, Facebook, and obviously his website there as well. So he's got multiple showrooms.
And what's the website address for Hobbs Group?
It's www.hobbsbathroom.
Hobbs Bathrooms? We'll look it up and I'll put it in the show notes if anyone wants to check it out. Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah, I don't know that one off. I'm sorry.
That's so fine. That's so fine. We'll put it in the show notes for later. All good. All right. Well, Lisa, thank you so much for your time today. Thank you for sharing your experiences and your stories with us. It's been really great, and I think it'll be helpful for many people, especially if anyone's starting out on their journey of looking into tiny house living. So thank you.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure. It's been a fun discussion.
Yeah, my pleasure too. And if you're listening to this episode, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us, and make sure you go check out Lisa and Matt online. And if you want more Tiny House Conversations, I release new episodes every Thursday. So if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the latest episode is live. And we'll see you next time. Hey, Tiny Lifers, thanks so much for listening. And before you go, one of the best ways to support this podcast is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more valuable tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So make sure you head over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this episode and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thanks so much in advance. I appreciate you, and see you in the next session.